The tavern was alive with murmurs, a low hum of voices barely above a whisper, as shadows danced against the cracked plaster walls. Etienne Moreau sat near the hearth, his fingers tracing the rim of a chipped clay cup, his dark eyes scanning the anxious faces around him. The flickering candlelight cast uneven glimmers on worn coats and tired eyes. But beneath the surface, an undercurrent of suspicion pulsed steadily. "I heard something disturbing," murmured one man, his voice tight and cautious. "Plans leaked again. Another arrest last night." Etienne's heart tightened. The revolution was fragile as a flame in the wind, and now it seemed the very shadows that protected them also harbored enemies. He exchanged a glance with Claire Dubois, whose fiery auburn hair seemed to catch the candle's glow, her sharp eyes reflecting the same unease. "We must find the source," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "If there is a mole, they will unravel everything we've fought for." Etienne nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He had barely come to terms with the dangers of the rebellion, and now betrayal lurked within their ranks, threatening to consume them all. Far from the warmth of the tavern, Philippe Rousseau moved like a shadow through the twisting alleys of Paris. His cloak was pulled tight against the chill night air, footsteps silent on the cobblestones. With each step, he carried secrets stolen from those who trusted him a spy serving Count Henry de Villiers, whose cold eyes sought to extinguish the flame of revolution. Philippe paused beneath a flickering street lamp, the glow revealing his sharp features etched with cunning. He clutched a folded parchment close, the encoded messages that had fallen into his hands, now weapons in the hands of the old regime. The distant sounds of unrest, the clatter of a wagon, the murmur of an approaching patrolry minded him of the stakes. Every secret delivered was a nail in the coffin of the revolutionaries' hopes. Back in the candle shop, Etienne sat with Jacques Lambert, his mentor, and Claire. The room smelled of melted wax and wood smoke, a fragile sanctuary amidst the chaos beyond the door. Etienne spread several lanterns on the rough wooden table, their surfaces still warm from recent crafting. His fingers, steady and sure, examined the subtle irregularities, tiny imperfections that betrayed the presence of hidden codes. "The messages are becoming riskier," Jacques said gravely, his weathered hands resting on the table. "Someone is listening." Claire's voice was fierce. "We must move quickly. If they know our plans, more lives will be lost." Etienne felt a cold resolve harden within him. They were being hunted from within, and the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Days later, a secret meeting convened in a cramped, dimly lit room behind a shuttered bakery. The air was thick with unease as revolutionaries gathered, faces drawn and voices tight. Accusations flew like sparks, igniting anger and fear. "How could one of us betray the cause?" one man demanded, his fist pounding the table. "We must be careful with words," Claire cautioned, her eyes steady. "But we cannot ignore the truth. The traitor endangers us all." Etienne's gaze swept the room, searching for signs, furtive glances, nervous shifts, whispered denials. Trust, once their strongest bond, now frayed like a worn thread. The meeting ended with no resolution, only a chilling reminder that the fight for Paris was as much against enemies within as without. Etienne returned to his lanterns, the wax now a symbol not only of hope, but of the fragile trust that held them together. The coded messages had to be safeguarded, their secrets protected at all costs. He understood now that the revolution was not just a battle of swords and fire, but of silence and shadows. As Paris simmered with unrest, Etienne's determination grew. He would find the traitor, expose the lies, and protect the fragile light of justice flickering amidst the darkness. For in this city of fire and betrayal, the cost of silence was death not just of bodies, but of hope itself. The chapter closed with Etienne standing alone beneath the dim glow of a street lantern, the cold wind whispering through the narrow streets. His breath formed pale clouds, and in his eyes burned the fierce light of resolve. The enemy was close, but so too was the courage to face what lay ahead. Would he uncover the traitor before more lives were lost? The city held its breath, and so did Etienne. The workshop was silent except for the faint crackle of the candle's flame and the soft scratching of Etienne's hand as he carefully traced the delicate patterns embedded in the wax. His eyes, wide and dark, reflected the flickering light, mirroring the turmoil within. Once, these hands had been steady only for the humble craft of shaping wax and wick. Now they trembled with the weight of secrets that could alter the fate of Paris itself. Etienne leaned back, his slender fingers lingering on the lantern before him. It was more than a mere vessel of light. It was a bearer of hope, a silent messenger in a city consumed by shadows and fire. The coded script hidden inside was a lifeline, whispered plans and warnings concealed beneath layers of wax, carried through the streets like fragile promises. The room smelled of beeswax and smoke, the scent mingling with the faint musk of old wood and the lingering traces of soot on Etienne's skin. He rubbed his palms together, trying to steady the flutter of nerves that danced beneath his skin. How had he come so far from the timid apprentice who once feared the very idea of rebellion? The transformation felt as slow and inexorable as the melting wax itself and inevitable reshaping. A sudden creak at the door startled him, and he turned to see Jacques Lambert enter, his weathered face softened by a kindly smile. The master candlemaker's hands were thick and worn, yet they moved with a careful grace as he approached the table. "You carry more than wax in your hands now, Etienne," Jacques said quietly, placing a firm hand on the young man's shoulder. "These lanterns are not just tools for light, they are the sparks of justice in a dark time. Remember, each flame you bear is a beacon for those who cannot speak aloud." Etienne nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I feel the weight, Jacques. It's heavier than I imagined. Sometimes I wonder if I am capable of carrying it." Jacques' eyes, deep with years of wisdom and unspoken sorrow, met his. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to go on despite it. You have that in abundance, Etienne. The words settled over him like a balm, steadying the storm within. Yet, as Jacques departed, Etienne knew that the true test awaited beyond the safety of the workshop walls. Night had fallen over Paris, cloaking the city in a shadowy veil punctuated by distant cries and the occasional flash of torchlight. Etienne's footsteps echoed softly against the cobblestones as he moved swiftly, the lantern cradled in his arms like a fragile heart. Each step was measured, every breath mindful. The streets were fraught with danger, and the eyes of spies and soldiers lurked in every corner. The lantern's glow cast a warm pool of light around him, a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. Yet Etienne could feel the invisible weight of the messages he carried, the lives tethered to each secret word. His youthful face, usually animated with curiosity, was now etched with solemn determination. He recalled the faces of those he fought for, the hungry children in the alleys, the weary workers, his own brother Lucien, innocent and unaware of the storm gathering around them. The lanterns were more than duty, they were a promise. Returning to the workshop, the first pale light of dawn brushing against the windows, Etienne set the lantern down carefully. He reached for fresh wax and began to mold another candle, embedding new messages within its heart. The candle's flame flickered as he worked, shadows dancing across the walls, as if the fire itself whispered encouragement. With each careful stroke, Etienne felt a quiet courage blooming inside him. The weight of wax was heavy, but it was also the weight of justice, hope, and the unyielding spirit of a city poised on the brink of change. As the sun rose, casting golden light through the dusty panes, Etienne knew that his journey was far from over. The lanterns he crafted would shine in the darkest nights, guiding those who dared to dream of freedom. And though the path ahead was shrouded in peril, he was ready to bear the weight, one flickering flame at a time. But even as he prepared for the days to come, a silent question gnawed at him. Could the fragile light of a single lantern truly withstand the consuming fire of revolution? Only time would tell. And so, with the dawn breaking over Paris, Etienne steeled himself for the trials ahead, his hands marked by wax and soot, his heart ignited by a flame that would not be easily extinguished. The weight of wax was more than physical, it was the burden of a cause, the spark of rebellion, and the hope of a brighter tomorrow. The rain had begun as a mere drizzle, soft and tentative, but now it fell in earnest, drumming on the cobblestones of the narrow alleyways that twisted like veins through the heart of Paris. Etienne Moreau pulled his cloak tighter around his slender frame, the damp chill seeping through the fabric and settling into his bones. The lantern he carried cast a wavering light, the flame flickering wildly as the wind snatched at the canvas and wax. Drops of water splattered against the glowing glass, distorting the shadows that danced on the uneven walls. Etienne's heart beat with a frantic rhythm, echoing the tumult outside. The city was alive with unrested echoes of distant shouts, the crackling of fires burning behind shuttered windows, the clatter of hurried footsteps on wet stone. Tonight, more than ever, the line between safety and peril was razor thin. He paused beneath an overhanging eave eyes, scanning the darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with deliberate caution. The man's features were obscured beneath a hood, but the intensity in his eyes shone like embers caught in a dying flame. Etienne's breath hitched. This was the contact Claire had warned him about, the messenger who claimed to hold critical information for the revolutionaries. "You are Etienne Moreau." The voice was low, gravelly, and edged with urgency. "I am," Etienne replied, gripping the lantern tighter. "And you?" "A friend, if you choose to trust me. There are eyes everywhere, enemies, who would see us crushed before dawn. What I carry could turn the tide, but it must not fall into the wrong hands." The words hung heavy between them, mingling with the scent of wet earth and burning wood carried on the wind. Etienne's mind raced. Trust was a luxury few could afford in these days. Betrayal had already shattered alliances, and every whispered secret risked death. Yet the promise of aid, of knowledge, was a flame too bright to ignore. Before he could answer, a sharp voice cut through the silence. "Etienne," Claire emerged from the shadows, her auburn hair damp and clinging to her determined face. Her eyes blazed with a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. "You should not be here alone. This meeting, it reeks of danger." Etienne glanced between the two figures, uncertainty warring with his burgeoning courage. "He says he has information vital to our cause." Claire's gaze narrowed, or a trap. The stranger stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I understand your caution, but I risk much by coming here. Count Henry tightens his grip, and time runs short. If you refuse to listen, the revolution will falter." A sudden roar shattered the fragile, distant explosion echoed through the city, flames licking the horizon where the night sky bled red. The sounds of chaos surged closer, desperate cries, the clash of metal, the pounding of feet. Paris was burning. Claire grasped Etienne's arm, her voice a whisper yet sharpened by urgency. "We must decide, now." Etienne swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing upon him like the thick smoke that now crept through the alleys. His gaze settled on the lantern's trembling flame, a fragile beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. Trusting this stranger could mean salvation or destruction. He drew a steadying breath. "I will listen, but if this is betrayal, the consequences will be dire." The man nodded solemnly, producing a folded piece of parchment from beneath his cloak. Etienne took it, fingers trembling as he unfolded the document. The coded markings were intricate, a language only those versed in secrecy could decode. Yet the urgency was clear. Plans for an imminent strike, vulnerabilities in Count Henry's defenses, and warnings of spies within their own ranks. Back at the candle shop, Etienne sat alone in the flickering light, the glow of a newly crafted lantern casting long shadows across the wooden walls. His mind churned with questions and doubts. Could he trust the messenger? Was this information genuine or a cunning ploy to dismantle the revolution from within? Claire's words echoed in his ears. The line between friend and foe grows thinner every day. Etienne's fingers absently traced the patterns on the lantern's surface, the wax cool beneath his touch. In this fragile light, the lantern was more than a source of illumination. It was a symbol of hope, a weapon against the growing darkness. His decision would shape the path ahead, thrusting him deeper into the perilous struggle that consumed Paris. The fires of revolution burned hotter with each passing hour, and at this crossroads, Etienne's courage would be tested as never before. Outside, the city's heartbeat quickened, a symphony of chaos and defiance. The night was far from over, and the flickering flames of justice demanded a choice. As the first light of dawn threatened to break, Etienne resolved to stand firm. The lantern's glow a silent vow against the shadows. The revolution was no longer a distant whisper, it was a roaring blaze, and he would be its bearer, no matter the cost. But in the depths of his heart, a question lingered. As persistent as the flicker of the flame, could trust survive in a city consumed by fire and betrayal? The answer would come soon enough, beneath the burning skies of Paris. The night had fallen with a heavy shroud over Paris. The city streets, dimly lit by the occasional flicker of distant fires, and the rare lanterns swaying in the cold breeze. Etienne Moreau moved silently through the narrow alleys, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and urgency. The mission had ended. Disastrously, key revolutionaries had been seized by the guards, their fates unknown, their voices silenced in the dark cells of a grim prison. The weight of failure pressed down on Etienne's chest, each breath shallow as he approached the forbidding stone facade that loomed before him. He paused, the rough cobblestones uneven beneath his worn shoes, and peered through the iron bars of a nearby window. Inside, shadows danced against the cold walls, and faint murmurs of despair reached his ears. The faces of those taken friends, comrades haunted him. The coded lanterns he had so carefully crafted, the secret messages he had carried through perilous streets, had not been enough to prevent this loss. A bitter taste of guilt burned in his throat. Had his hands, once steady in shaping wax, become instruments of doom? Etienne's thoughts spiraled, the silence of the city outside contrasting sharply with the turmoil within. He recalled Jacques Lambert's words from earlier that day, steady, measured, and full of an unyielding kindness. Jacques, the master candle maker who had taught him not only the craft but the quiet courage to endure, had been a pillar in the storm. The price of silence, Jacques had said, is often paid in the currency of sacrifice. But the flame we carry, Etienne, must never be allowed to die. The candle shop was a sanctuary amid the chaos, its air thick with the scent of melting wax and wood smoke. Jacques sat behind the workbench, his hands weathered and worn, yet steady as ever. The soft glow of half-finished lanterns cast gentle shadows on his lined face. He looked up as Etienne entered, eyes filled with the sorrow of shared loss, but also with a resolute spark. "You carry a heavy burden," Jacques began, voice low but unwavering. "But remember, no great change comes without cost. The revolution we fight for is not merely against men or crowns, but against the darkness that seeks to smother the dawn." Etienne nodded, the knot in his throat loosening only slightly. "I feel as though I have failed them all," he confessed, "as if my silence has condemned them." Jacques stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Etienne's shoulder. "Silence is not your burden alone, and it is not the absence of sound, but the promise of a louder cry yet to come. We must learn from this, and let it kindle our resolve, rather than extinguish our hope." The following dawn found Etienne along the banks of the Seine, where Claire Dubois awaited him. The early morning mist clung to the water's surface, and the city's awakening murmurs filled the air. Claire's auburn hair caught the pale light, and her eyes, sharp and fierce, met Etienne's with an intensity forged by shared hardship. "We knew the road would be perilous," she said quietly, "but we cannot let grief anchor us in despair. Our fight is for those who cannot speak, for those who still dream of justice." Etienne felt the weight of her words settle within him, a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination. "I fear the cost is too high," he admitted, "but to abandon the cause now would be to betray all we hold dear." Claire reached out, her hand briefly clasping his. "Then we carry the flame together, no matter the darkness ahead." That night, alone in his small attic room, Etienne sat by the window, a single candle burning on the wooden desk. The flame flickered uncertainly, casting dancing shadows over the scattered scraps of wax and parchment. Outside, the distant sounds of unrest echoed faintly, a reminder that the city was far from peace. He stared into the flame, its fragile glow a metaphor for his own wavering spirit. The faces of those lost haunted him still. But within that flicker he glimpsed something more, the promise of light after darkness, of hope forged through sacrifice. With a deep breath, Etienne reached out and steadied the candle's flame, his resolve hardening like the wax he shaped. The revolution's path was strewn with loss and silence, but its light, his light, would endure. The fight was far from over, and he would carry the lantern forward, bearing its message through the shadows of Paris. As the candle burned steadily on, Etienne whispered into the night, "For justice, for hope. For those who cannot speak, the flame will never die." Outside, the city held its breath, poised on the edge of change, as the first light of a new day began to break. The morning air in Paris carried a chill that seemed to seep into Etienne Moreau's bones as he navigated the narrow streets toward a place he had avoided for many years. The familiar clamor of the city, the shouts of market vendors, the distant clang of metalworkers, the occasional bark of a street dog mingled with an undercurrent of unrest that had grown louder each day. Yet Etienne's steps were steady, driven by something deeper than the noise around him. Turning a corner, he found himself standing before a shadowed alleyway, its entrance framed by crumbling stone walls streaked with soot and time. A small weathered plaque was affixed there, its inscription faded but still legible, in memory of Jean Moreau, taken by the fires of tyranny. 1789. Etienne's breath caught. This was the spot where his father had fallen. crushed beneath the weight of a violent crackdown during one of the earlier uprisings and event that had left a wound in Etienne's heart that never truly healed. He knelt slowly, fingers tracing the cold, rough surface of the plaque. The flickering shadows cast by a nearby lantern danced across the stone, as if the flames themselves were speaking of a past too heavy to forget. Memories surged unbidden, his father's strong hands, rough from years of labor, the quiet courage in his eyes as he told Etienne to be brave, the chaos of that dreadful night when soldiers stormed the streets and Jean was caught in the crossfire. Etienne swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. The pain of loss was raw, yet beneath it lay a burning ember of resolve. He had come here not to linger in sorrow, but to draw strength from the memory of the man who had given everything for justice. Rising slowly, Etienne whispered a silent vow into the cold air, to protect his family, to guard his younger brother Lucien's innocence, and to carry forward the fight his father had begun. The familiar creak of the candle shop door behind him pulled Etienne back to the present. Inside, the warm glow of lanterns cast soft pools of light over the wooden shelves cluttered with wax, wicks, and half-finished lanterns. Jacques Lambert, his mentor and friend, looked up from his workbench, his face lined but gentle. Etienne, Jacques greeted softly, noticing the solemn expression shadowing the young apprentice's features. "You look as if you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders today." Etienne offered a faint, tired smile. "I was visiting a place from my past, a reminder of why this fight matters." Jacques nodded, reaching out to brush a streak of soot from Etienne's cheek. "Your father was a brave man, and so are you. Remember, the flame of justice is not just in the streets it burns here," he said, tapping Etienne's chest lightly. Within you, the reassurance filled Etienne with a fragile warmth. The candlelight flickered, shadows stretching and shrinking as if echoing the turmoil within. Later that afternoon, Etienne found himself in the small courtyard behind their modest home, watching his younger brother Lucien play. The boy's laughter tumbled through the air like a fragile melody, untouched by the gathering storm outside. Lucien chased a makeshift wooden hoop, his eyes bright with innocent joy, oblivious to the dangers creeping ever closer. Etienne's heart tightened at the sight. The world was changing rapidly, and the price of revolution was steep. He crouched quietly by the wall, hidden from view, and clutched a freshly crafted lantern, its glass shimmering with the promise of light. He knew he would soon carry messages through perilous streets, risking everything to keep hope alive. From the distance, a roar rose, protesters clamoring, the clash of metal, the crackle of distant fires. Etienne's gaze hardened. The city was aflame with unrest, and the battle for justice was no longer a distant whisper, but a raging inferno. He rose, taking one last look at Lucien's carefree face before stepping back into the shadows. The lantern's glow illuminated his determined eyes as he prepared to face whatever trials awaited. This was his moment to honor his father's sacrifice, to shield his brother's innocence, and to kindle the light of revolution in the darkest of nights. As Etienne disappeared into the maze of Parisian streets, the echoes of the past whispered alongside the flickering flames, urging him onward into the uncertain dawn.